A billionaire gave his credit card to a homeless girl to test her, but what she bought broke his heart. Arthur Blackstone stood outside the pharmacy on Fifth Avenue, his $1,000 shoes clicking against wet pavement. Rain had started falling 20 minutes ago, sending most people scrambling for cover. But not the girl huddled against the brick wall. She couldn't be older than 8. Torn jeans that were obviously hand-me-downs, oversized hoodie with holes at the elbows, and eyes that held too much pain for someone so young. Arthur had seen her there 3 days straight now, watching people walk by without a second glance. Most billionaires would have kept walking. Arthur almost did. Instead, he stopped. "What's your name?" The girl looked up, startled. Her face was pale, cheeks hollow from hunger. "Ilara," she whispered, voice barely audible over the rain. "How long have you been out here, Ilara?" She shrugged. "Few weeks. Maybe longer. Hard to keep track." Arthur studied her face. No drug track marks on her arms. No telltale signs of addiction. Just a kid who'd somehow ended up on the streets. His cynical mind immediately went to work. Was this an act? A setup? In his world, everyone wanted something. "I'm going to test something," Arthur said, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out his Platinum American Express card. No limit. No restrictions. Pure financial power in a piece of metal. Ilara's eyes widened as he held it out to her. "Take it," he said. I can't." She shook her head. "That's crazy. Take the card, Ilara. Buy whatever you want. No questions asked." Her hands trembled as she reached for it. "What if I run? What if I max it out?" Arthur's lips curved into a cold smile. "Then you'll prove what I already know about people like you." The words hit her like a slap. People like you. Arthur had meant it as a test of character, but the pain that flashed across Ilara's face told him she'd heard something else entirely. She stood up slowly, card clutched in her dirt-stained fingers. 1 hour. 24 hours, Arthur corrected. "Do whatever you want with it. I'll be waiting right here tomorrow at noon." As Ilara disappeared into the crowd, Arthur felt that familiar satisfaction. He'd done this before, tested people with money, power, opportunity. They always showed their true colors eventually. The card would be maxed out on designer clothes, expensive meals, maybe even drugs. Another confirmation that poverty didn't make people noble. It just made them desperate. He returned to his penthouse, poured himself a scotch, and waited. The next morning, Arthur's assistant handed him a manila folder. "The transaction report you requested, sir." Arthur opened it, expecting to see thousands in frivolous purchases. Designer stores, high-end restaurants, electronic shops. Instead, he stared at a single line item. CVS Pharmacy, $47.83. "That's it?" Arthur asked. "That's everything, sir." One purchase. She didn't even come close to the daily limit. Arthur's chest tightened. $47. What could she possibly have bought for $47 that took her an entire day to decide on? At noon, he returned to the same spot. Ilara was there, holding out his card with both hands like it was made of glass. "Thank you," she said quietly. Arthur took the card, studying her face. She looked different. Not just clean, she'd somehow found a place to shower, but there was something else. Hope, maybe. Or relief. "What did you buy?" he asked. Ilara's eyes filled with tears. "My little brother Rowan's asthma inhaler. He's been without it for 3 weeks. I tried everything, clinics, emergency rooms, charity programs. Nobody would help without insurance." She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "He's only 6. Last night, he couldn't breathe properly, and I thought." She couldn't finish the sentence. Arthur felt like someone had punched him in the gut. "Your brother? We've been hiding in an abandoned building 6 blocks from here. Our mom died last year, and the system tried to split us up. I ran away from my foster home to find him." Her voice cracked. "I couldn't let them separate us again." The rain had stopped, but Arthur felt colder than he had all morning. The inhaler cost $47, $47.83, she said. I spent 20 minutes staring at it in the pharmacy. I kept thinking you'd call the police, say I stole the card. But Rowan needed it so badly. Rowan. My brother. A small smile crossed her face. He's the smart one. Always reading, always asking questions. Before Mom got sick, she used to say he'd be the one to change the world someday. Arthur's throat felt tight. His test hadn't revealed Alara's greed. It had revealed his own cynicism. This girl, with access to unlimited funds, had bought medicine for her dying brother and nothing else. Where is he now? Arthur asked. Alara's smile faded. Safe. Hidden. I can't tell you where. I'm not going to hurt him. That's what they all say. Her voice hardened. Rich people, social workers, cops, everyone has an angle. Everyone wants something. Before Arthur could respond, a voice cut through the afternoon air. Alara. They both turned. A small boy stepped out from behind a parked car, clutching a backpack to his chest. His breathing was labored but steady. The inhaler was working. Arthur's blood ran cold as the boy's eyes met his. Those weren't the eyes of a 6-year-old. They were ancient, suspicious, filled with an intelligence that seemed to see right through Arthur's expensive suit to something rotten underneath. Who's this? The boy asked, but he wasn't really asking Alara. He was asking Arthur. And somehow, Arthur knew that his answer would determine everything that happened next. Rowan stepped fully into view, and Arthur immediately understood why Alara had been so protective. This wasn't just any 6-year-old. Despite his small frame and the inhaler clutched in his hand, Rowan carried himself like someone much older. His dark eyes never left Arthur's face, studying him with an intensity that made the billionaire squirm. You're the one who gave her the card, Rowan said. It wasn't a question. Arthur nodded, suddenly feeling like he was the one being tested. I am. Why? Such a simple word, but Arthur found himself struggling to answer. Because I wanted to prove she was like everyone else. Because I needed to confirm that poverty makes people greedy. Because I'm so disconnected from real suffering that I turned it into a game. I wanted to help, he said instead. Rowan's laugh was sharp bitter, too cynical for a child. No, you didn't. You wanted to see what she'd do with your money. You wanted to watch her fail. The accuracy of it hit Arthur like a physical blow. That's not. My sister told me about your face yesterday, Rowan interrupted. The way you smiled when you said people like you. Like we're animals in a zoo you're studying. Alara moved protectively closer to her brother. Rowan, don't. No, he needs to hear this. The boy took a wheezing breath, then stepped forward. You think giving us money makes you some kind of hero? You think $47 is going to erase the 3 weeks I couldn't breathe properly? The nights Alara went without eating, so I could have her share of whatever scraps we found. Arthur felt heat rising in his chest, anger, shame, something he couldn't quite name. I didn't know about your situation. Because you didn't ask. Rowan's voice was steady, controlled. You saw a homeless girl and decided to play puppet master. Test her morals. Judge her choices. I was trying to. You were trying to make yourself feel better, Rowan said. Rich people always are. You throw money at problems so you can sleep at night, then act surprised when it doesn't magically fix everything. The words stung because they were true. Arthur had spent millions on charitable donations over the years, tax write-offs that looked good on paper and made him feel generous at fancy galas. But when was the last time he'd actually looked someone in poverty in the eye? What would you have me do? Arthur asked, his voice sharper than intended. Rowan smiled, and for the first time he looked like the child he was, mischievous, clever, dangerous. That's the wrong question. What's the right question? The right question is, what are you going to do now that you know? Arthur glanced at Alara, who was watching the exchange with growing alarm. She'd seen this before, her brilliant little brother verbally sparring with adults who underestimated him. The problem was, Rowan usually won these battles, and the adults didn't appreciate being outmaneuvered by a kid. Now that I know what? Arthur asked. That we're not your entertainment. That poverty isn't a character test. That everything you think you understand about people like us is wrong. Rowan's breathing was getting more labored, but he pressed on. You gave Alara your card expecting her to prove she was greedy, selfish, unworthy of help. Instead, she proved she's better than you. The silence stretched between them. Arthur felt exposed, raw, like Rowan had peeled back layers of justification and self-righteousness to reveal something ugly underneath. You're right, Arthur said quietly. Rowan blinked, clearly not expecting that response. I wanted her to fail, Arthur continued. I wanted confirmation that giving people money is pointless because they'll just waste it. It would have been easier than actually caring. Alara's hand found her brother's shoulder. Rowan, you're breathing. But the boy shook his head, still staring at Arthur. Easier for who? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Arthur opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. Because the truth was devastating in its simplicity. Easier for him. Easier to stay disconnected. Easier to write checks than to acknowledge that people like Rowan and Alara existed in his world. I don't know what you want from me, Arthur said finally. Rowan's smile returned, sharper this time. I want you to stop pretending this is about us. Before Arthur could ask what he meant, Rowan's breathing suddenly became shallow, rapid. His face paled, and the inhaler slipped from his fingers. But as Arthur moved forward to help, he caught something in the boy's eyes, a flicker of calculation that made him wonder. Was this collapse real, or was Rowan about to teach him another lesson he'd never forget? Follow me, Alara whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder as she led Arthur through a maze of back alleys. And stay quiet. There are others hiding in these buildings. They don't trust strangers. Arthur's designer shoes splashed through puddles he'd never noticed from his limousine windows. The smell hit him first, decay, dampness, human desperation. They stopped at a rusted warehouse door hanging off its hinges. Inside, Arthur's breath caught. This wasn't just abandoned. It was a hidden world. Makeshift walls created small rooms using cardboard and tarps. Soft voices echoed from the shadows. At least a dozen people had made this place home. Back here, Alara said, leading him to a corner where blankets formed a tiny shelter. That's when Arthur saw him. Aaron couldn't have been more than 4 years old, curled on a pile of old clothes that served as a bed. His breathing was shallow, labored. His small chest rose and fell with obvious effort, and his lips had a blue tinge that made Arthur's stomach clench. How long has he been like this? Arthur asked, kneeling beside the boy. 3 days, Rowan answered from behind him. Ever since the rain started. His asthma gets worse when it's cold and wet. Arthur reached out to touch Aaron's forehead. The child was burning with fever. He needs a hospital. Now. No. Rowan's voice was steel. No hospitals. He's dying, Rowan. Hospitals mean questions. Questions mean social services. Social services means they take us away from each other. Rowan moved protectively closer to his brothers. We stay together or not at all. Arthur looked between the 3 children, Alara's desperate hope, Rowan's stubborn defiance, and little Aaron fighting for each breath. The weight of their situation crashed over him. These weren't just homeless kids. They were a family, clinging to each other against a system that had already failed them once. What if I brought a doctor here? Arthur asked. Rowan's eyes narrowed. What doctor makes house calls to abandoned warehouses? A private one. Someone who won't ask questions or call authorities. And what's that going to cost us? Rowan demanded. Because we can't pay. It costs you nothing, Arthur interrupted. It cost me everything I spent on lunch yesterday. The bitter irony wasn't lost on him. Yesterday's business lunch had cost more than these kids had seen in months. Today, that same amount could save a life. Alara knelt beside Aaron, smoothing his matted hair. Would they really help? No questions. Arthur pulled out his phone. Let me make some calls. 20 minutes later, Arthur hung up his final call. Dr. Martinez will be here in an hour. She's bringing medical supplies and won't report anything to authorities. Rowan studied Arthur's face. Why are you doing this? It was a fair question. Arthur had asked himself the same thing while making those calls. Was it guilt? Some twisted form of ego? Or had something fundamental shifted when he'd seen Aaron struggling to breathe? I don't know, Arthur admitted. For the first time, Rowan looked like the frightened 6-year-old he was. What if she can't help him? What if it's too late? Arthur wanted to offer false promises, empty reassurances. Instead, he said, then we'll deal with whatever comes next. Together. The word surprised him as much as it surprised them. Together. When had Arthur ever dealt with anything together with anyone? His entire life had been built on independence, on not needing other people. Dr. Martinez arrived with 2 large medical bags and no questions. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and steady hands. Arthur had worked with her before. She ran a clinic in the poorest part of the city and understood discretion. Severe respiratory infection, she diagnosed after examining Aaron. His asthma is complicating everything. He needs antibiotics, breathing treatments, and constant monitoring. Can you treat him here? Alara asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dr. Martinez looked around the cold, damp warehouse. I can stabilize him, but he needs a clean, warm environment to recover. This place. She trailed off diplomatically. Arthur made a decision that surprised even him. My penthouse. Bring him to my penthouse. Absolutely not, Rowan said immediately. It's clean, warm, and private. No one will bother us there. Us. Rowan's voice cracked. There is no us. You're not part of this family. The word stung, but Arthur pushed forward. Your brother is dying. Your pride won't save him. Alara looked between Arthur and Rowan, then down at Aaron. The little boy's breathing had become even more labored during their conversation. Rowan, she said quietly, maybe. No, we don't know him. We don't know what he really wants. Arthur felt frustration building. What I want is to keep your brother alive. Why? Rowan demanded. Give me one good reason why some billionaire suddenly cares about 3 homeless kids. Arthur opened his mouth to answer, then realized he didn't have one. Not one that made sense anyway. Not one that didn't sound like the same hollow charity speech he'd given at dozens of galas. Before he could respond, Aaron's breathing became rapid and shallow. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and panicked. Dr. Martinez moved quickly, pulling equipment from her bag. We're losing him. If we're going to move him, it has to be now. Rowan looked at his dying brother, then at Arthur. In that moment, Arthur saw the impossible choice no 6-year-old should ever have to make. But what Rowan said next changed everything. If he dies because I trusted you, I'll make sure you never forget it. Arthur's penthouse had never felt smaller. Dr. Martinez had transformed his pristine living room into a makeshift intensive care unit. Monitors beeped steadily, an oxygen tank hummed in the corner, and 4 lines snaked across his Italian marble floors. Aaron lay on Arthur's leather couch, looking impossibly tiny among the expensive cushions. His fever broke an hour ago, Dr. Martinez whispered to Arthur. The antibiotics are working, but the next few hours are critical. Arthur nodded, watching Alara hold her little brother's hand. She hadn't moved from that spot in 6 hours. Rowan sat nearby, alert and suspicious, his eyes constantly scanning Arthur's movements. You should eat something, Arthur told Alara gently. She shook her head without looking away from Aaron. I'm not hungry. Arthur's chef had prepared a full meal, real food, not the scraps these kids had been surviving on. But fear had killed their appetites. Arthur understood. He hadn't eaten either. Alara, Dr. Martinez said softly. His breathing is much stronger now. The medications are working. For the first time since they'd arrived, Ilara's shoulders relaxed slightly. Really? Really? See how his color is better? The blue around his lips is gone. Arthur watched as hope flickered in Ilara's eyes. It was a foreign emotion in this apartment. Hope. His penthouse had seen million-dollar deals, power plays, and strategic victories. But never hope. Never the raw, desperate kind that came from watching someone you love fight for their life. Why don't you try to rest? Dr. Martinez suggested. I'll monitor him through the night. Ilara finally looked up. I can't leave him. You're not leaving him. You're taking care of yourself so you can take care of him tomorrow. Arthur stepped forward. There's a guest room right down the hall. You can hear everything from there. Ilara hesitated, then looked at Rowan. Some silent communication passed between them before Rowan nodded slightly. Okay, she whispered. But if anything changes, I'll wake you immediately, Dr. Martinez promised. After Ilara reluctantly went to the guest room, Arthur found himself alone with Rowan and the steady beeping of medical equipment. The boy hadn't spoken to him since they'd arrived. He's going to be okay, Arthur said quietly. Rowan didn't respond. Dr. Martinez is one of the best pediatric specialists in the city. If anyone can help him. Stop, Rowan interrupted. Just stop pretending you care about us. Arthur felt a familiar anger rising. I spent $15,000 today to save your brother's life. If that's not caring. $15,000. Rowan's laugh was bitter. That's what you make in an hour, isn't it? Maybe less. The accuracy stung. Arthur made more than that in 30 minutes on most days. Money is easy for you, Rowan continued. Real caring means sacrifice. What have you actually sacrificed for us? Before Arthur could answer, Aaron stirred on the couch. His eyes opened slowly, clearer than they'd been in days. Ilara, he whispered, his voice hoarse but strong. Arthur moved toward him. She's resting. How do you feel, buddy? Aaron looked up at Arthur with confusion. Who are you? I'm a friend. Rowan snorted. He's the rich guy who thinks money solves everything. Arthur shot him a look, but Aaron was already studying Arthur's face with the serious expression that seemed to run in this family. Are you the one who brought the doctor? Aaron asked. Arthur nodded. Thank you, Aaron said simply. 2 words. But they hit Arthur harder than any business victory ever had. When was the last time someone had thanked him for something that actually mattered? Not for a donation that would get his name on a building or a charity check that reduced his taxes. For actually helping save a life. You're welcome, Arthur managed. Dr. Martinez appeared at his elbow. His vital signs are excellent. The infection is responding beautifully to treatment. Arthur felt something unfamiliar in his chest, relief mixed with genuine joy. Not the satisfaction of closing a deal or beating a competitor. Something warmer. Something real. Can I see Ilara? Aaron asked. Arthur went to wake her, and when she saw her little brother sitting up asking for water, she broke down completely. Not the quiet crying she'd been doing for days, but deep, body-shaking sobs of relief and gratitude. Thank you, she whispered to Arthur through her tears. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Arthur had to turn away. The raw emotion was overwhelming. In his world, people hid their feelings behind polite smiles and strategic positioning. But Ilara's gratitude was pure, unfiltered, honest. For the first time in his adult life, Arthur felt like he'd done something that actually mattered. The rest of the night passed quietly. Dr. Martinez monitored Aaron's recovery, while the exhausted children finally slept in real beds. Arthur found himself pacing his penthouse, unable to rest. At dawn, he stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city he'd conquered through ruthless ambition and calculated moves. Down there, people were starting their day, going to jobs, taking care of families, struggling with problems Arthur had never had to face. 3 days ago, he'd seen those people as statistics, economic units, market segments. Now he saw Ilara, Rowan, and Aaron in every face. His phone buzzed with the morning's financial reports. Markets were up. His portfolio had gained another $2 million overnight, while he'd been focused on saving a 4-year-old's life. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd made more money sleeping than these kids had seen in their entire lives. Arthur was still staring out the window when Dr. Martinez approached. "He's going to make a full recovery," she said. "Whatever you did yesterday, you saved that boy's life." Arthur nodded, but something felt off. Too quiet. Too easy. That's when he noticed his study door was slightly open. He always kept it locked. Always. Arthur walked over and pushed it open, his heart sinking. Rowan sat at Arthur's desk, surrounded by confidential files, bank statements, and private documents. The boy looked up with cold, calculating eyes. "Now I know why you really helped us," Rowan said, holding up a manila folder. "And it's worse than I thought. Put that down." Arthur's voice was dangerously quiet. Rowan held up the folder higher. Blackstone Foundation tax records. Very interesting reading. Arthur stepped into the study, his mind racing. Those files contained sensitive information about his charitable foundation, including the parts that weren't quite as charitable as they appeared on paper. "You have no idea what you're looking at," Arthur said. "I know exactly what I'm looking at." Rowan's voice was steady, mature beyond his years. "Shell companies. Tax shelters disguised as charities. You've been using homeless shelters and children's hospitals as write-offs, while barely giving them enough to stay open." The accuracy was devastating. Arthur had built his foundation the same way he built everything else, strategically, efficiently, with maximum benefit to himself. Business is complicated. Business. Rowan's laugh was sharp. "You call profiting off suffering business?" Before Arthur could respond, his phone rang. His assistant's panicked voice filled the room through the speaker. "Mr. Blackstone, we have a situation. There's a photo of you at some warehouse yesterday. It's all over social media." Arthur's blood turned to ice. "What kind of photo?" "You're kneeling next to what looks like a sick child. The headlines are not good." Arthur grabbed his phone and pulled up the news feed. The photo was grainy, but clear enough. Arthur Blackstone, billionaire, in an abandoned warehouse, surrounded by homeless children. The headlines were brutal. "Billionaire's secret, caught in homeless warehouse, tax dodge or PR stunt." Blackstone's suspicious charity work. What was Arthur Blackstone really doing there? "Someone followed us," Arthur muttered. "Or someone tipped them off," Rowan said quietly. Arthur spun around. I think you needed good press for your foundation. I think 3 photogenic homeless kids make excellent marketing material." The accusation hit like a physical blow. Arthur stared at this 6-year-old boy who seemed to see through every layer of manipulation and spin that Arthur had spent decades perfecting. "That's not what this is," Arthur said. "Then what is it?" Arthur opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. Because the truth was complicated. Had some part of him calculated the optics? Had some buried instinct considered how this might play in the media? His phone buzzed with text after text. His publicist, his lawyer, board members. Everyone wanted to know what story they should be spinning. "The foundation's under investigation now," Rowan said, still holding the files. "One anonymous tip to the right journalist, and all your tax schemes fall apart." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm protecting my family." Arthur looked at this child, this brilliant, damaged, suspicious child, and realized the horrible truth. Rowan was right to be paranoid. In Arthur's world, people didn't help others without an angle. There was always a catch, always a hidden motive. "What do you want?" Arthur asked quietly. "I want you to prove you're not like every other rich person who's used us as photo opportunities." "How?" Rowan stood up, the files scattered across Arthur's desk like evidence in a courtroom. "Bring us home with you. Publicly. Let everyone see that you actually care about us, not just the tax benefits." Arthur's mind reeled. "You want me to what? Make us part of your family. Officially. where everyone can see. The request was impossible. Arthur's entire life was built on carefully controlled image management. Bringing 3 homeless children into his world would raise questions he wasn't prepared to answer. But as Arthur looked at Rowan's challenging stare, he realized something had shifted. This wasn't about charity anymore. This wasn't about tax breaks or good publicity. This was about 3 children who had no one else. Arthur made a decision that would either save them all or destroy everything he'd built. "Pack your things," he said quietly. "All of you. We're going home." But as the words left his mouth, Arthur's phone rang again. His lawyer's panicked voice filled the room. "Arthur, don't do anything dramatic. The FBI wants to talk." 3 weeks later, Arthur's mansion felt like a different world. Aaron had fully recovered, his laughter echoing through halls that had been silent for decades. Alara had started online school, her sharp mind devouring knowledge that had been denied to her for years. Even Rowan seemed to be relaxing, though Arthur often caught him watching doorways like he was planning escape routes. Arthur found himself doing things he'd never imagined. Helping with homework, ordering kid-friendly groceries, learning that 8-year-olds had very strong opinions about breakfast cereal. The media storm had mostly died down. Arthur's lawyers had managed the FBI inquiry. Turns out tax avoidance and tax evasion were 2 very different things, and Arthur had been careful to stay on the legal side of that line. Barely. But the investigation had forced him to restructure his foundation properly. Real money going to real causes. It was costing him millions in actual taxes. He found he didn't mind as much as he'd expected. "Arthur." Alara's voice called from the kitchen. Aaron spilled juice on his math homework. Arthur smiled, something that was becoming a disturbing habit. He was heading toward the kitchen when he heard it, the soft click of his study door. He'd given the children free run of most of the mansion, but the study remained off limits. Too many sensitive documents. Too many business secrets that could be dangerous in the wrong hands. Arthur moved quietly down the hall and peered through the crack in the door. Rowan sat at Arthur's computer, fingers flying across the keyboard with surprising skill for a 6-year-old. Arthur's financial records were open on the screen, along with several browser windows showing legal databases and news sites. Arthur's first instinct was anger, then disappointment, then something deeper, hurt. He pushed the door open. "Find anything interesting?" Rowan didn't startle or try to hide what he was doing. He simply turned in the chair and met Arthur's eyes with that unsettling directness. "You're planning to adopt us," Rowan said. Arthur blinked. That wasn't what he'd expected. "How did you?" "Legal documents in your email. Meeting with family court lawyers. Applications for emergency custody." Rowan's voice was matter-of-fact. "Why didn't you tell us?" Arthur stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "Because I wanted to make sure everything was properly arranged first. The system is complicated. The system is designed to separate families like ours," Rowan interrupted. "Foster care, group homes, adoptions that split up siblings. You know that, right?" Arthur sat down across from the boy. "That's why I'm trying to keep you together." "Are you?" Rowan turned the computer screen toward Arthur. "Because according to your emails with the lawyers, there's a problem. Something about my behavioral concerns and trust issues." Arthur's stomach sank. Those emails were supposed to be confidential discussions about how to handle Rowan's understandable suspicion of adults. But reading them out of context, they sounded like Arthur was looking for ways to, "You think I'm trying to get rid of you," Arthur said quietly. "I think you're realizing that damaged kids aren't as easy as you thought they'd be." Rowan's voice was steady, but Arthur could see the pain underneath. "Alara's sweet and grateful. Aaron's young and adaptable. But me? I ask too many questions. I don't trust easily. I remember too much." Arthur felt like he was looking into a mirror, seeing his own cynicism reflected in a 6-year-old's eyes. "What exactly do you think I'm planning?" Arthur asked. Separate homes. You keep Alara and Aaron. They're easier to love. I go somewhere else. Maybe a nice boarding school for difficult children. The words hit Arthur like physical blows. Because buried in his emails with the lawyers, there had been discussions about specialized schools for gifted children with trauma backgrounds. Arthur had thought he was exploring all options to help Rowan. But he could see how it might look like he was looking for ways to. That's not what, Arthur started. Isn't it? Rowan pulled up another email. Quote, Rowan requires specialized attention that might be better provided in an institutional setting. End quote. Arthur closed his eyes. He'd written that email after a particularly difficult night when Rowan had woken up screaming from nightmares, then spent 2 hours questioning Arthur's motives for helping them. I was trying to find you the best possible help, Arthur said, by sending me away, by getting you therapy and education from people who understand trauma. Rowan laughed, and it was the most bitter sound Arthur had ever heard from a child. Every adult who's ever wanted to get rid of me has said it was for my own good. Arthur felt something breaking inside his chest. This brilliant, damaged boy had been abandoned by every adult who was supposed to protect him. And now Arthur, despite his genuine intentions, was being grouped with all the rest. What would it take for you to trust me? Arthur asked quietly. Rowan studied his face for a long moment. Prove that you're not like them. How? Stop trying to fix me. Stop looking for ways to make me easier to handle. Just let me be who I am, even if that's inconvenient for you. Arthur looked at this extraordinary child, too smart, too suspicious, too hurt, and realized something fundamental. He'd been approaching this like a business problem to be solved rather than a relationship to be built. Okay, Arthur said simply. Okay, what? Okay, I'll stop trying to fix you. You're not broken, Rowan. You're just careful. And given what you've been through, that's probably smart. For the first time since Arthur had known him, Rowan looked genuinely surprised. But before either of them could say anything else, Alara's scream echoed through the mansion. Arthur and Rowan ran toward the sound, but what they found in the kitchen stopped them cold. 3 social workers stood in the doorway, with court documents and grim expressions. We're here for the children, one of them said. There's been a complaint. 2 days after the social workers left empty-handed, Arthur's lawyers had been faster than expected. The mansion felt different, quieter, more careful. The children had passed their interviews. Arthur's emergency custody had been approved. But something had shifted in all of them during those tense hours of questioning. Arthur found them in his garden, a place he'd barely noticed in 15 years of living here. Aaron was chasing butterflies through the rose bushes, his laughter pure and unguarded. The sound made Arthur's chest tight with an emotion he couldn't name. He's never seen flowers before, Alara said, appearing beside Arthur. Not real ones, just pictures in books. Arthur watched his youngest. What were they now? Wards? Foster children? The legal terms felt cold for what was happening in his heart. What about you? Arthur asked. What do you think of the garden? Alara touched a white rose carefully, as if it might disappear. It's like something from a fairy tale. Too beautiful to be real. Arthur had spent $2 million on this garden, hired the best landscape architects, imported rare plants from around the world. He'd never once sat in it, never noticed its beauty. It had been another acquisition, another symbol of success. Now, watching Alara discover wonder in something he'd taken for granted, Arthur saw it through new eyes. Arthur, Aaron called, running toward them with dirt on his knees and joy on his face. There are strawberries, real strawberries growing in the ground. Arthur knelt down as Aaron threw small arms around his neck. The hug was spontaneous, trusting, completely unguarded. When had anyone hugged Arthur like that? Like he was safe. Like he was home. Can we pick some? Aaron asked. They're yours, Arthur said. Everything here is yours now. But even as he said it, Arthur noticed Rowan watching from the glass greenhouse. The boy stood alone, separate, his expression unreadable. Even from a distance, Arthur could feel the wall of suspicion that still surrounded him. Arthur walked over to the greenhouse. Inside, Rowan was studying a rare orchid with scientific fascination. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Arthur said. "Expensive," Rowan replied without looking up. "This one species probably costs more than most families make in a year." Arthur couldn't deny it. The orchid collection had cost him nearly $50,000. "You don't approve?" Rowan finally looked at him. "I'm trying to figure out who you really are. The man who saves dying children, or the man who spends $50,000 on flowers while kids freeze in warehouses 6 miles away?" The question hit deep. Arthur had been asking himself the same thing for weeks now. "Maybe I'm both," Arthur said quietly. "That's what scares me," Rowan replied. "Because I don't know which version of you will still be here tomorrow." Before Arthur could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from his head of security. "Sir, we have a problem. Check the news." Now, Arthur pulled up the news feed on his phone, and his blood turned to ice. The headline read, "Billionaire's Secret Children. Photos reveal shocking truth." Below, it was a crystal-clear aerial photograph of Aaron, Alara, and Rowan playing in Arthur's garden, taken by what had to be a professional drone. Someone had been watching them. Someone had been waiting for the perfect shot. And now the whole world was asking the same question Rowan had been asking all along. What was Arthur Blackstone really up to? Within hours, the internet had exploded. Arthur's phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters, lawyers, and board members. But it was the social media storm that truly shocked him. #BlackstoneKids was trending worldwide. The theories ranged from heartwarming to horrifying. Billionaire secretly adopts homeless children hero. Rich predator uses charity as cover. Investigate now. Tax scheme using fake family. Follow the money. Arthur scrolled through hundreds of comments, each one a judgment on his life, his motives, his character. People who had never met him were debating whether he was a saint or a monster. "They think you're using us," Rowan said, reading over Arthur's shoulder. Arthur hadn't heard him approach. The boy moved like a ghost when he wanted to. "Some of them do," Arthur admitted. "Are you?" The simple question deserved a simple answer, but Arthur found himself hesitating. Not because he was using them. He knew he wasn't. But because the question forced him to examine his own motives more deeply than he was comfortable with. "No," Arthur said finally. "But I understand why people might think that." Rowan pulled up a chair beside him. "Show me the worst ones." Arthur hesitated. Some of the comments were vicious, cruel, designed to hurt. "I can handle it," Rowan said. "I've heard worse things said about me to my face." Arthur scrolled to a particularly nasty thread. "Those kids are props. Billionaires don't suddenly develop hearts. This is damage control for his foundation scandal. Look at their clothes, their hair. They're too clean to be real homeless kids. This whole thing is staged. Someone needs to investigate this freak before those children disappear." Arthur watched Rowan read each comment, his young face emotionless. When they finished, Rowan was quiet for a long moment. "They don't know us," he said finally. "They don't know what we've been through or what you've done for us. Does that bother you?" Rowan shrugged. "People have been making assumptions about us our whole lives. Poor kids are lazy. Homeless kids are criminals. Foster kids are damaged goods." He looked at Arthur. "Rich people are evil. Maybe they're wrong about that too." Before Arthur could respond, Alara burst into the room, her face streaked with tears. "I can't go online anymore," she sobbed. "They're saying horrible things about us. About you. They're saying we're liars and you're A." She couldn't finish the sentence. Arthur pulled her into a hug, feeling her small body shake against his chest. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry you had to see that." "Why are people so mean?" she whispered. "You saved Aaron's life. You gave us a home. Why can't they see that?" "Because they don't know the real story," Arthur said. "They only see what they want to see." Then tell them, Ilaris said, pulling back to look at him. Tell them the truth. Arthur's publicist had been suggesting the same thing, a carefully controlled interview, a sympathetic journalist, a chance to manage the narrative. But Arthur had refused. He didn't want to turn the children into a media spectacle. It's not that simple, Arthur said. Why not? Rowan asked. What are you afraid of? The question caught Arthur off guard. What was he afraid of? That people would see through his motives? That they'd discover he wasn't as noble as he appeared? Or was he afraid of something deeper? That once the cameras were rolling and the question started, he might not like the answers he heard himself giving? Arthur, Ilaris said quietly, my teacher says that sometimes the truth hurts, but lies hurt worse. Arthur looked at these 3 children who had somehow become his family. They deserved better than to be dragged through a media circus because of his past mistakes. But before he could decide what to do, his assistant rushed into the room. Sir, she said breathlessly, we have a bigger problem. The board has called an emergency meeting. They're talking about a vote of no confidence. Arthur's blood ran cold. A vote of no confidence meant one thing. They wanted him out. Everything he'd built, everything he'd worked for, was about to be put on the line. And the choice he made next would determine not just his future, but the future of 3 children who had already lost everything once. The boardroom felt like a courtroom. 12 faces stared at Arthur from around the mahogany conference table. Faces that had smiled and shaken his hand at charity galas. Faces that had celebrated his successes and profited from his vision. Today, those same faces looked at him like he was a stranger. Arthur, said Victoria Sterling, the board chairwoman, we need to discuss your recent personal decisions. Arthur remained standing at the head of the table. He'd built this company from nothing, turned it into a billion-dollar empire. These people worked for him, not the other way around. But corporate boards had their own power, and Arthur could feel that power shifting against him. My personal life is not board business, Arthur said calmly. It is when it affects stock prices, snapped Gerald Hayes, the longest-serving board member. We've lost $40 million in market value since those photos went public. Temporary fluctuation. It's not temporary if the FBI investigation reopens, Victoria interrupted. Taking in those children looks like witness tampering. Or worse. Arthur felt his temper rising. Those children have names, and they're not witnesses to anything except my attempt to help them. Help them. Gerald laughed harshly. Arthur, you're a businessman, not a social worker. This savior complex is destroying shareholder confidence. What exactly are you suggesting? The board members exchanged glances. Victoria cleared her throat. We're suggesting you distance yourself from this situation. Quietly. Let social services find appropriate placement for the children, issue a statement about temporary charitable assistance, and refocus on business. Arthur stared at her. You want me to abandon them? We want you to be realistic, said another board member, Marcus Cole. You've known these kids for what, a month? This isn't your responsibility. They're my family. The words came out before Arthur could stop them. The boardroom fell silent. Family. Victoria's voice was ice cold. Arthur, you adopted 3 strangers to improve your public image. Now that it's backfired, you need to cut your losses. That's not what this is. Then what is it? Gerald demanded. Because from where we sit, it looks like a midlife crisis that's costing us millions. Arthur looked around the table at these people who had made fortunes from his vision, his work, his sacrifices. None of them had children. None of them understood what it felt like to watch Aaron laugh, to see Alara discover books, to slowly earn Rowan's trust. I'm not abandoning them, Arthur said quietly. Victoria leaned forward. Then we have a problem. The board has already drafted a vote of no confidence. Unless you reconsider your position, we'll be forced to remove you as CEO. The threat hung in the air like a blade. Arthur had built this company with his bare hands, but corporate law was clear. The board could vote him out if they believed he was acting against the company's interests. You would destroy everything we built together over 3 children? Arthur asked. You're the one destroying it, Marcus replied. We're trying to save it. Arthur walked to the window overlooking the city. Somewhere down there, 3 kids were probably doing homework in his mansion, maybe wondering if he'd come home for dinner. How had it come to this? How had caring about someone, really caring, not just writing checks, become a liability? I need time to think, Arthur said. You have until tomorrow morning, Victoria said. Board vote is scheduled for 9 a.m. Choose wisely, Arthur. Some things can't be rebuilt once they're broken. As Arthur left the boardroom, his phone buzzed with a text from Alara. Aaron drew you a picture at school today. He can't wait to show you. When are you coming home? Arthur stared at the word home. When had his mansion become home? When had 3 damaged children become the most important thing in his life? And was he really willing to lose everything he'd worked for to protect them? His phone rang. The caller ID made his heart stop. Rowan. But when Arthur answered, it wasn't Rowan's voice he heard. It was a stranger's voice, cold and threatening. We have the boy. If you ever want to see him again, you'll do exactly what we say. The phone call had been a hoax, a cruel prank from someone who'd gotten Arthur's number from the media circus. But it had taken 45 minutes and 3 frantic calls to his security team to confirm that all 3 children were safe at home. 45 minutes of pure terror that had shown Arthur exactly where his priorities lay. Now he sat in his study with Rowan, both of them shaken by the false alarm. Alara and Aaron were asleep, unaware of how close Arthur had come to losing everything in that boardroom. They really want you to get rid of us, don't they? Rowan said quietly. Arthur didn't see any point in lying. Yes. And if you don't, they'll remove me from a company I built. Rowan was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. You should do it. What? You should choose the company. Send us back to the system. It makes sense. Arthur felt like he'd been punched. Is that what you want? It doesn't matter what I want, Rowan said, but his voice cracked slightly. It matters what's smart. And keeping us isn't smart for you. Arthur knelt down in front of Rowan's chair, forcing the boy to meet his eyes. Why are you really saying this? Rowan's composure finally cracked. Because I don't understand why you're doing this, he burst out. Normal people don't risk everything for random kids they found on the street. There has to be an angle, a reason, something you're not telling us. What if there isn't? Then you're lying or you're crazy, and either way, we're not safe. Arthur sat back on his heels, studying this brilliant, damaged child. You want to know why I'm really doing this? Rowan nodded warily. Arthur took a deep breath. He'd never told anyone this story, not his lawyers, not his board, not even his therapists over the years. When I was 6 years old, my father lost his job. We got evicted from our apartment, and for 8 months, we lived in his car. Rowan's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't speak. It was a beat-up Honda Civic. My father would park it behind different buildings every night so the police wouldn't notice. I slept in the back seat. He slept in the front. We ate whatever free food we could find, church soup kitchens, food banks, sometimes nothing. Arthur's voice grew quieter. I remember being so hungry that I'd dream about food. I remember my father crying when he thought I was asleep because he couldn't give me the life he'd promised my mother before she died. What happened? Rowan whispered. A social worker found us. She was going to put me in foster care, split us up. My father begged her for one more chance. She gave him 2 weeks to find work and housing, or she'd take me away. Arthur met Rowan's eyes. He found a job washing dishes at a restaurant. The owner let us sleep in the storage room until my father saved enough for a real apartment. That restaurant owner didn't have to help us. There was no benefit to him, no tax write-off, no good publicity. He just saw a father trying to keep his son, and he decided that mattered. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Is your father still alive? He died when I was in college. worked himself to death trying to give me opportunities he never had. Arthur's throat felt tight. I built this company to honor him, to prove that his sacrifices mattered. But somewhere along the way, I forgot the most important thing he taught me. What was that? That sometimes the only reason you need to help someone is that they need help. Rowan studied Arthur's face with that unsettling intensity. You really lived in a car for 8 months. And you really understand what it feels like to be us. Arthur nodded. I understand what it feels like to be afraid that the adults who are supposed to protect you might fail. I understand what it feels like to not know where you'll sleep tomorrow night. For the first time since Arthur had known him, Rowan's suspicious mask slipped completely. What Arthur saw underneath was just a scared, smart kid who'd been hurt too many times. The board meeting tomorrow, Rowan said quietly. What are you going to tell them? Arthur had been wrestling with that question all day. His empire versus 3 children. His life's work versus his newfound family. I'm going to tell them that some things are more important than money, Arthur said. But as the words left his mouth, Arthur's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Victoria Sterling's name, and her first words made Arthur's blood run cold. Arthur, I'm sorry to call so late, but there's been a development. The FBI wants to interview the children tomorrow morning, before the board meeting. The security alarm screamed through the mansion at 2:47 a.m. Arthur jolted awake, his heart hammering as red lights flashed in his bedroom. His phone was already buzzing with calls from his security team. Sir, we have multiple breaches on the south side, his head of security reported. At least 3 individuals with professional equipment. Arthur was already pulling on clothes. Where are the children? Safe in their rooms. I've got men posted at each door. Arthur ran through the hallway toward the children's wing, but stopped when he saw Rowan standing in his doorway, fully dressed. You heard the alarm, Arthur said. I never really sleep anymore, Rowan replied. Who's trying to get in? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Through the mansion's windows, Arthur could see flashlights moving across his property. Not random burglars. These people knew exactly where they were going. They're heading for the garden, Arthur realized. The same spot where those photos were taken. His security chief's voice crackled through his earpiece. Sir, they've got high-end camera equipment. Telephoto lenses. They're trying to get shots through the children's bedroom windows. Arthur's blood turned to ice. These weren't just paparazzi looking for a story. They were trying to photograph sleeping children in their bedrooms. Stop them, Arthur ordered. Whatever it takes. Arthur headed for the stairs, but Rowan grabbed his arm. Where are you going? To handle this. You can't go out there alone. What if this is a setup? What if someone wants to hurt you and blame it on protecting us? Arthur paused. The thought hadn't occurred to him, but Rowan was right. In his current position, Arthur was vulnerable to all kinds of manipulation. Then what do you suggest? Rowan's jaw set with determination. We go together. You protect us, I protect you. Before Arthur could object, Rowan was already moving down the stairs. Arthur followed, marveling at this kid's strategic thinking even in crisis. They reached the main floor as Arthur's security team cornered the intruders near the rose garden. Arthur could see them clearly now, 3 people with expensive cameras and night vision equipment. Get those cameras, Arthur called to his security team. But one of the intruders broke away, running toward the house with a telephoto lens aimed at the upper windows. Arthur moved to intercept him, placing himself between the camera and his children's bedrooms. The photographer raised his camera anyway, and Arthur grabbed for it. That's when Rowan appeared out of nowhere, positioning himself perfectly to block the photographer's angle to the house, while staying clear of the physical confrontation. For the first time since Arthur had known him, Rowan was actively helping instead of just watching and judging. The security team quickly subdued all 3 intruders. As they were led away in handcuffs, Arthur found one of their dropped cameras. The photo previews showed dozens of shots, the mansion's layout, the children's bedroom windows, even close-ups of Arthur through the windows. They weren't just taking pictures, Arthur said grimly. Rowan picked up a piece of paper that had fallen from one of the intruder's pockets. His face went white as he read it. Arthur, he said quietly, this isn't about photos. He handed Arthur the paper. It was a floor plan of the mansion with the children's rooms circled in red, and written at the bottom in block letters, extraction point 0300 hours. Someone hadn't been trying to photograph the children. Someone had been trying to take them. Dawn was breaking over the mansion as police finished their investigation. The 3 intruders had been arrested, but their cameras and equipment had been wiped clean. No identification, no fingerprints in the system, no way to trace who had hired them. Arthur found Alara sitting alone in the kitchen, staring at her untouched breakfast. Couldn't sleep either, he asked gently. She shook her head. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept thinking about those men trying to get into our rooms. Arthur sat beside her. They're gone now. They can't hurt you. That's what they always say, Alara whispered. What do you mean? Alara was quiet for a long moment, tracing patterns on the table with her finger. Before our mom died, she was sick for a really long time. The social workers kept coming around, telling us everything would be okay, that we'd stay together, that someone would take care of us. Arthur felt his chest tighten. They lied, Alara continued. They split us up the day after Mom's funeral. Put me in one home, Rowan in another. Aaron was supposed to go to a different family, but I ran away and took him with me. That's how you ended up on the streets. Alara nodded. Every adult who was supposed to help us just made promises they couldn't keep. Foster parents who said they wanted us, but only wanted the money. Social workers who said they cared, but never remembered our names. Arthur understood now why Rowan was so suspicious, why all 3 children seemed to expect disappointment. They'd been let down by every adult who was supposed to protect them. I don't know how to believe promises anymore, Alara said, her voice barely audible. Even yours. The honesty hit Arthur like a physical blow. What can I do to prove that I'm different? I don't know, Alara admitted. Part of me wants to trust you so badly. You saved Aaron's life. You gave us a home. You stood between us and those scary men last night. But what happens when you get tired of us? What happens when the newspapers make you look bad, or your business friends don't like us, or we cost you too much money? Arthur knelt down so he was at eye level with her. Alara, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I will never abandon you. Not for money, not for business, not for anything. How can you promise that? Because you're not a burden to me. You're not a charity case or a tax write-off or a public relations strategy. You're my family. Tears started flowing down Alara's cheeks. What if the government tries to take us away again? What if those men come back? What if? Then I'll fight, Arthur said simply. I'll fight with everything I have to keep us together. Alara searched his face, looking for any sign of deception. Arthur let her look, let her see everything. His fear, his determination, his love for these 3 children who had changed his entire world. Okay, she whispered finally. I'll try to believe you. Arthur pulled her into a hug, feeling her small body relax against his chest for the first time since he'd known her. But as they sat there in the morning light, Arthur's phone buzzed with an urgent text from his lawyer. Emergency. Aaron's medical records have been subpoenaed. Someone's building a case that you're an unfit guardian. They're coming for the children today. Arthur was still processing his lawyer's text when he heard Alara scream from upstairs. He took the stairs 3 at a time, his heart pounding. In Aaron's bedroom, he found the little boy convulsing on the floor, his breathing rapid and shallow. His skin was pale and clammy, and his temperature felt dangerously high. Call Dr. Martinez, Arthur shouted to Alara, who was kneeling beside her little brother with tears streaming down her face. Rowan appeared in the doorway, took one look at Aaron, and immediately started moving furniture to create more space around him. How long has he been like this? Arthur asked, cradling Aaron's small body. I don't know, Elara sobbed. I went to wake him up for breakfast, and he was already shaking. Dr. Martinez arrived within 20 minutes, but those 20 minutes felt like hours. Arthur watched helplessly as Aaron drifted in and out of consciousness, his breathing becoming more labored with each passing moment. His immune system is compromised, Dr. Martinez said after her examination. The stress of the constant upheaval, the security threats, the media attention, it's all taking a toll on his body. But he was getting better, Arthur said desperately. Children with chronic conditions like asthma need stability to heal. Constant stress triggers relapses. She looked at Arthur seriously. I'm not just talking about physical stability. I'm talking about emotional security. These children have been through trauma after trauma. Their bodies are in permanent fight or flight mode. Arthur felt like the floor was falling out from under him. What do we do? Aaron needs to be in an environment where he feels completely safe, where he knows beyond any doubt that he's not going to be moved again, separated from his siblings, or have his world turned upside down. Arthur looked at Rowan, who was standing silently by the window. What are you thinking? I'm thinking with a problem, Rowan said quietly. As long as we're with you, there's going to be chaos. Reporters, investigators, people trying to prove you're unfit. Aaron will never have the stability he needs. That's not true, isn't it? Rowan turned around, and Arthur saw tears in the boy's eyes for the first time. Look at what's happening to him. Every time someone attacks you in the news, every time there's another crisis, Aaron gets sicker. Dr. Martinez packed up her equipment. I've given him medication to stabilize him for now, but this can't continue. If his stress levels don't decrease dramatically, these episodes will become more frequent and more severe. After she left, Arthur sat with Aaron while the little boy slept fitfully. Elara had fallen asleep in a chair beside the bed, exhausted from worry. But Rowan remained awake, watching Arthur with those calculating eyes. You're thinking about adoption, aren't you? Rowan said. Arthur was startled by the accuracy. How did you? Because it's the logical solution. Legal adoption means permanent custody. No more questions about our living situation. No more threats from social services. Would that be so bad? Rowan's expression hardened. You want to make us your property. That's not what adoption means, isn't it? Rowan stood up, his voice rising. You sign papers, and suddenly we belong to you. We have to take your name, live by your rules, become who you want us to be. Rowan, that's not how I see it. Then how do you see it? Rowan demanded. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you want to own us. Make it official. Turn us into your perfect little family for the cameras. Arthur felt anger rising in his chest. After everything they'd been through, after all his sacrifices, Rowan still questioned his motives. I want to protect you, Arthur said through gritted teeth. I want to make sure no one can ever take you away again. By taking us away from ourselves. Rowan shot back. We're not broken toys that need fixing, Arthur. We're people. We have our own identities, our own history, our own family bond that existed long before you came along. I'm not trying to erase your history. Then why does adoption feel like you're trying to replace our real parents? The question hung in the air like a blade. Arthur stared at this brilliant, damaged boy and realized the horrible truth. Rowan wasn't just afraid of being abandoned again. He was afraid of betraying the memory of the parents he'd lost. Before Arthur could respond, the doorbell rang. Multiple times. Urgently. Arthur looked out the window and felt his blood turn to ice. 3 black SUVs sat in his driveway, along with a police car and an official-looking sedan. Child Protective Services had arrived in force, and they weren't here for a friendly visit. Arthur opened the front door to find 6 officials standing on his doorstep, 2 police officers, 3 Child Protective Services workers, and 1 woman in an expensive suit who looked like she meant business. Arthur Blackstone, the woman in the suit asked, though she clearly already knew the answer. Yes. She held up a folder thick with legal documents. I'm Margaret Thorpe, Regional CPS Director. We have a court order for the immediate removal of 3 minors from this residence. Arthur's hands went numb. On what grounds? Endangerment, exploitation, and providing an unstable environment. She began reading from the official document. Evidence includes media harassment, security breaches, attempted kidnapping, and medical neglect, resulting in repeated hospitalizations. Medical neglect. Arthur's voice cracked. I provided the best medical care. A child under your supervision has been hospitalized multiple times due to stress-related complications directly connected to your custody. Margaret interrupted. That constitutes medical neglect in our assessment. Arthur's lawyer had warned him this might happen, but Arthur hadn't believed it would come to this. Not after everything they'd been through together. The children are sleeping, Arthur said desperately. Aaron just had an episode this morning. He needs rest. Which is why we're removing them to a stable environment immediately, Margaret replied. Please step aside, Mr. Blackstone. I won't let you take them. The 2 police officers moved closer. Sir, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, but those children are leaving with us today. Arthur heard footsteps on the stairs behind him. He turned to see all 3 children standing there, Ilara clutching Aaron protectively. Rowan's face set with grim determination. What's happening? Ilara asked, though her voice suggested she already knew. Margaret stepped forward with a practiced smile. Hello, children. I'm Margaret from Social Services. We're here to take you somewhere safe. We're safe, Aaron said quietly, moving closer to Arthur. I understand this is confusing, Margaret said in that condescending tone adults use when they think children can't handle truth. But there have been some concerns about your living situation here. Rowan stepped forward. What kind of concerns? Margaret glanced at her paperwork. Well, there have been security incidents, media intrusions, and questions about Mr. Blackstone's motivations for taking you in. His motivations? Rowan's voice was ice cold. You want to know his motivations? Arthur put a warning hand on Rowan's shoulder, but the boy shrugged it off. He found us when we were dying in a warehouse, Rowan continued. He saved my brother's life with his own money. He stood between us and people trying to hurt us. He kept every promise he made to us. Margaret's expression softened slightly. I know you care about Mr. Blackstone, but what? Ilara spoke up, her voice stronger than Arthur had ever heard it. But we're supposed to trust you instead? Trust the same system that split us up after our mother died? Trust the same people who put us in homes where nobody wanted us. The foster system has improved. The foster system is broken, Rowan said flatly. And you know it. You're taking us away from the first adult who ever kept his word to us because some people on the internet think he has bad intentions. One of the police officers stepped forward. Kids, we need you to come with us now. Get your things. No, Aaron said, wrapping his arms around Arthur's leg. Sweetheart, you have to. No. Aaron's voice rose to a scream. I'm not going. Arthur is my family. Arthur knelt down and pulled Aaron into a hug, feeling the little boy's body shake with fear and anger. Over Aaron's head, he met Rowan's eyes. For the first time since they'd met, Arthur saw something new in Rowan's expression. Not suspicion, not calculation, trust. Complete, desperate trust that Arthur would somehow find a way to fix this. But as Margaret Thorpe reached into her briefcase and pulled out what looked like custody transfer papers, Arthur realized he might have run out of ways to protect the family he'd fought so hard to build. Mr. Blackstone, Margaret said, you have 10 minutes to say goodbye before we escort the children to their temporary placement. Arthur looked at the 3 faces staring up at him. Ilara's desperate hope, Aaron's terrified confusion, and Rowan's newfound faith that Arthur would somehow save them. 10 minutes to say goodbye to his heart. Arthur opened the front door to find 6 officials standing on his doorstep. 2 police officers, 3 child protective services workers, and 1 woman in an expensive suit. Arthur Blackstone, the woman in the suit asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Yes. She held up a folder thick with legal documents. I'm Margaret Thorpe, Regional CPS Director. We have a court order for the immediate removal of 3 minors from this residence. Arthur's hands went numb. On what grounds? Endangerment, exploitation, and providing an unstable environment, Margaret said, her voice a practiced monotone. Evidence includes media harassment, security breaches, attempted kidnapping, and medical neglect, resulting in repeated hospitalizations. Arthur's blood turned to ice. Medical neglect? I provided the best medical care. A child under your supervision has been hospitalized multiple times due to stress-related complications directly connected to your custody. Margaret interrupted. That constitutes medical neglect in our assessment. Arthur turned and saw the children standing on the stairs. Ilara clutched Aaron's hand, while Rowan's face was a mask of fear. Rowan ran down the stairs, ignoring Arthur's quiet protest. He stepped in front of his siblings, a defiant shield. Please, he said, looking at Arthur. Don't let them take us. Don't let them split us up. It was the most vulnerable Arthur had ever seen him. The boy who had lectured him about cynicism and profit was reduced to a frightened child begging for protection. Arthur knelt to his level. I won't. I'll fight them with everything I have. But Rowan's desperate trust immediately shattered. And you'll lose, he spat, his voice laced with the bitterness Arthur knew so well. You'll say you tried, and then you'll let them take us, just like everyone else. That's not going to happen. Why not? What's in it for you this time? A tax break? A new business deal? How much is our freedom worth to you? The words cut Arthur to the core. After everything he'd done, after everything they'd been through, Rowan still saw their relationship through the cold, transactional lens of the world Arthur had built. Nothing, Arthur said, his voice raw. You're worth nothing to me. Because you're not a thing to be valued. You're a person I refuse to give up on. He looked at Margaret, then back at Rowan. I built an empire from nothing, Rowan. I'm not afraid of the law, and I'm not afraid of the media. But I am afraid of losing you. You, Ilara and Aaron. You are my family now. And I will not, under any circumstances, let anyone hurt you again, even if that person is yourself. For the first time since they'd met, Rowan saw not a billionaire, but a man who understood his pain. And for the first time, he saw a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, this promise was real. Margaret Thorpe watched the exchange with a practiced eye. The public display of emotion was a liability she couldn't afford. She was losing control of the narrative, but she had one more card to play. Mr. Blackstone, your promises are not legally binding, she said, cutting into the emotional moment. A court order is. We are removing the children today. She stepped toward Ilara, her smile unctuous and fake. Ilara, sweetie, I'm sure you understand that this isn't a safe place for you anymore. Ilara looked from Margaret to Arthur, her heart in her eyes. This is all very confusing, I know, Margaret continued, her voice dripping with false concern. But you're a smart girl. You can make your own choice. She gestured to the police officers and the black cars. Would you rather stay here, in a home that's being watched by the media and under constant threat, or would you like to come with us to a quiet, peaceful place where you'll be safe? Arthur wanted to scream. He wanted to tell Ilara not to answer, to tell her that this was a trap. But he couldn't. This was Ilara's moment. He had to trust her. Ilara's gaze was fixed on the ground. She was trapped between 2 opposing forces, the survival instincts that told her to trust the system, and the hope that had bloomed in her heart after Arthur's kindness. Her mind raced with the years of broken promises and the fear that he was just another lie in an expensive suit. But she also remembered his hands, steadying her as Aaron fell sick. She remembered him standing in front of the cameras, like a shield. Ilara's voice was barely a whisper. She looked at Rowan, and in his eyes she saw the same conflict, the same desperate need to believe. Ilara, Margaret said, her voice a soft, encouraging whisper. Just tell me what you want. No one will be mad at you. Do you want to come with us? Ilara took a deep, shuddering breath. She thought of their life on the streets, the hunger, the cold. She thought of the safe, warm bed in the mansion, the books she had finally been able to read. And she knew what she had to do. She looked directly at Margaret, her chin high. I don't want to go with you. Margaret's smile faltered. Sweetie, you don't understand. I understand everything, Ilara said, her voice gaining strength. You asked me what I wanted. I want to stay with my family. She took a step closer to Arthur, placing herself squarely at his side. The police officers looked at each other, confused. The court order was for removal, but the child's public refusal was not in their script. This is not a negotiation, Margaret said, her friendly facade cracking. This is a court order. She made her choice, Arthur said, a dangerous calm in his voice. And in a court of law, a child's testimony is evidence. He glanced at a reporter, whose camera was still rolling. Are you going to drag a little girl out of her home on camera, against her will? Margaret was defeated. She had been outsmarted by a billionaire and a child. This public confrontation with the children's powerful testimony was not going the way she had planned. She gave Arthur a look that promised a long, drawn-out war. This isn't over, Mr. Blackstone, she said, her voice low and venomous. You've only delayed the inevitable. As the officials retreated to their vehicles, Arthur looked down at Ilara. She had made a choice that changed everything. She had placed her faith in him, and in doing so, she had given him the most powerful weapon he could possibly have. He had won this battle, but with the board meeting looming and a powerful new enemy, he knew the war was just beginning. Margaret Thorpe's friendly mask crumbled. That's enough, she snapped, gesturing to the police officers. A child's emotional manipulation does not override a legal order. Ilara's newfound courage was no match for the system. One of the police officers moved forward, and Ilara instinctively recoiled, pulling Aaron close. No, please, she begged. Don't take him. But the CPS workers were already moving, their faces set in grim determination. They weren't seeing children. They were seeing a case file, a court order, a job to be done. Arthur stepped between them, his body a silent, imposing shield, but the police held him back, their hands on his arms. That's when Rowan moved. He had been quiet, observing, but now he erupted. With a feral scream, he launched himself at the nearest CPS agent, kicking and scratching like a trapped animal. The agent stumbled back in surprise. Rowan wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to be heard, fighting for the impossible chance to stay. Don't touch them, he screamed, his small fists flying. You can't take us. He's our family. The police moved in. A strong hand grabbed Rowan by the arm, and the boy twisted, his body fighting against the unyielding strength. His cries grew more frantic as he was pulled away from his siblings. Arthur, he wailed. Don't let them take us. Arthur fought against the officers holding him, his mind screaming in protest. He had never felt so powerless. The man who owned corporations, who controlled markets, who held the fates of thousands in his hands, couldn't stop three determined people from taking the three most important people in his life. He could buy a country, but he couldn't buy their freedom. A male CPS worker scooped up a terrified Aaron, who was sobbing into his hands. Ilara was guided away, her eyes locked on Arthur's, a silent plea for a promise he was failing to keep. They led Rowan away in a headlock, still struggling, his small body flailing. The last thing Arthur heard was his voice, hoarse and broken, echoing in the hallway. You promised. The front door closed with a soft click, and the house fell silent. A terrifying, unnatural silence. Arthur stood alone in the marble foyer, his hands trembling. He had won the battle in the driveway, But he had just lost the war. The silence that followed was worse than any noise. The echoes of Rowan's screams seemed to hang in the air, a ghost in the mansion's vast, empty halls. Arthur walked through the house, a mausoleum of broken promises and shattered hopes. The grand rooms, once filled with the warmth of a temporary family, now felt cold and impersonal. A stray sneaker sat beside the front door, a testament to a hurried departure. A half-finished bowl of cereal was on the kitchen counter. In the living room, a worn-out copy of a children's book lay open on the couch. Every object, every space, was a painful reminder of what he had lost. He had spent his entire life building, acquiring, conquering. But now he understood that a home wasn't made of marble and gold. It was made of laughter, of sticky handprints, of the simple, chaotic presence of a family. He ran a hand over a wall, a single smudge of dirt left by Erin. He had tried to get the housekeeper to clean it, but she had looked at him with a strange, knowing pity. He had told her to leave it. He needed a reminder that this had all been real. Arthur moved toward his study, the room that had been the epicenter of this conflict. He sat at his desk, staring out the window at the empty driveway where the police cars had been. He had sacrificed everything to keep them safe, and now they were gone. His wealth, the thing he had relied on to solve every problem, had been useless. It had brought reporters, attracted enemies, and made them a target. Was it possible that his money hadn't saved them, but had actually led to their destruction? The quiet of the mansion was a heavy blanket. Every room felt like a monument to a life Arthur no longer wanted. He walked the halls, the sound of his footsteps echoing on the marble floor, a lonely rhythm in a house built for a family. In the kitchen, the empty cereal boxes sat on the counter where they'd left them. In the living room, a game controller lay on the carpet, waiting for a player who was never coming back. The silence felt like a physical presence, a painful reminder of what had been taken away. He sat in his study, surrounded by the trappings of a life that felt meaningless now. The stock market reports, the business contracts, the countless awards on the wall, they were all worthless. He had everything, and he had nothing. He had lost everything that mattered. As he was about to get up, a rustle on the floor caught his attention. A small, white envelope had been slid under the door. The paper was simple, not the thick, expensive kind he was used to. His heart jumped into his throat as he picked it up, a wave of hope washing over him. The front of the envelope was blank, but as he turned it over, he saw the back flap sealed with a small, hand-drawn star. It was a star Alara would always doodle on her homework. With trembling hands, he opened the envelope. Inside was a single, folded sheet of paper. The handwriting was a little messy, but he recognized it immediately. Alara's handwriting. He read the words, and his heart broke all over again. Thank you for trying. We know you did. You kept your promise. We won't ever forget you. Not for a single day. Stay safe. And please don't forget Erin. He misses you. E. The letter was short, but it held a truth that hit Arthur harder than any legal order. They were gone. He had lost. He had tried to be a hero, but in the end, he had failed. He had sworn to protect them, to never abandon them, but the system had come and taken them anyway. The letter was a thank you note for his failure. He sank into his chair, the paper clutched in his hand. The tears he had been holding back for days finally came. They weren't a storm, but a slow, silent river of grief, a private release for a man who had spent his whole life building walls and now found himself with nothing to protect. He had always believed that money was the solution, the ultimate shield against the world's problems. But a 6-year-old's terror and a little girl's desperate thanks had proven him wrong. The world was bigger than his money, and it had chewed up and swallowed the only thing he had ever truly cared about. He sat there for a long time, the paper a crumpled mess in his hand, the silence of the house a constant companion. The tears eventually stopped, but the ache in his chest didn't. He looked at the phone on his desk, the device that had brought him so much power, so much wealth, and so much pain. He knew what he had to do. He had to give up. He had to accept that they were gone and go back to the life he had before. He had to surrender. But as he reached for the phone, he saw the small, hand-drawn star on the back of the envelope. And he heard Alara's voice in his head, quiet but firm. "You promised." Arthur stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, looking out at the city he had built. He saw the buildings with his company's logo on them, the stadiums he had funded, the hospitals that bore his family's name. It was all a monument to his power, a testament to his ambition. But looking at it now, all he saw was an empty, hollow victory. He thought back to the promise he had made, the one he had whispered to a scared little boy, and the one he had shouted at a group of reporters and officials. He would fight with everything he had. He would not let them be taken. He had failed. But a promise wasn't a contract that expired when you lost a battle. It was a commitment. "A promise is a promise," he said. The words a rough whisper in the silent room. He turned from the window, a new resolve hardening his face. The man who had been defeated just moments ago was gone, replaced by the calculating, ruthless businessman who had built an empire from nothing. He had lost the first round of the fight, but now he was going to take the entire game. He was not just going to get his children back. He was going to dismantle the very system that had taken them. He picked up his phone, his fingers moving with a speed and confidence that had been absent for weeks. His first call was to his lawyer, but this time, the conversation was different. He didn't ask about custody hearings or legal loopholes. He asked about legal precedents. He asked about constitutional rights and child advocacy laws. He wasn't asking how to win. He was asking how to change the rules of the game. His next call was to a prominent journalist who had been sympathetic to his cause. He didn't offer an exclusive or a carefully managed story. He offered a full, tell-all interview, live, with no questions off limits. He was going to tell the world about his past, the homeless shelters, the nights in the car, his father's sacrifices. He was going to show the world the truth about who he was, and in doing so, he was going to expose the system that had failed so many other children just like him. He was going to use his wealth as a weapon, his power as a tool, and his reputation as a shield. But this time, it wasn't for profit. It wasn't for personal gain. It was for the 3 children who had trusted him with their lives. His final call was to a private investigator, a former law enforcement agent he trusted more than anyone. The instructions were simple and precise. Find my children, and then find every other child who had been failed by this system. This wasn't just about the Blackstones anymore. It was about all of them. He looked back out at the skyline, a city of towers and light. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors of fire. But Arthur wasn't looking at the sunset. He was looking at the dawn of a new day and the war he was about to start. Do you think Arthur will keep his promise? Comment below. We'll continue this together.